The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Guided. I am really excited to introduce you to this week's guest, Amanda Stoker. Now, you'll be hearing all about Amanda and her bio momentarily, but this entire session needs to be prefaced with a commentary all of its own. Now, Amanda and I had never met prior to this podcast recording. We were connected through a mutual friend, and as we started recording this episode, we got about 40 minutes into it, and mind you, we both had perfectly stable internet connections up until that point in time, when suddenly we decided to start talking about the ego and subsequently got kicked off of the platform multiple times. Now, this little song and dance happened several times, and it was so apparent to us that Spirit was trying to get a message through to both of us. So instead of plowing through the recording, we stopped what we were doing and took the time to tune into Spirit to understand what was happening and how best to proceed. So instead of pushing forward, we took some time for Amanda to work through a spiritual process and some healing. And once we did, we were actually able to resume the recording flawlessly, which only further served to reiterate to us that there was clearly a message trying to be sent during our time together. Now, given that this entire podcast is devoted to the different ways we are being guided in our lives, it seemed somehow negligent not to share this experience with you all as authentically as possible, because this is truly how the spirit world works and conspires in our favor. And when spirit needs to get any of us a message, they will go to great lengths to ensure that that happens. And this podcast is the first time that Amanda is sharing some of the information that she shares in a public form. So it makes total sense that there might be some ego interference in the process. But I really want to thank her for her willingness to lean into the process. You know, it's vulnerable enough to come onto a podcast when everything runs completely smoothly, no less when something like this happens. It can be jarring. But what was so impressive to me about Amanda is how willing she was to dive right into her own work and healing in the moment in order to transcend what was happening for us. And I want to thank her and honor her for this, because doing this work, especially in this way with me, someone she's never even met before, requires great trust and bravery. And you'll hear around halfway through this episode, we shift gears to talk about what happened. And Amanda talks about the experience that she moved through and the process. And I have such reverence for her own willingness to face her feelings and to move through the challenge in the spirit of helping herself and helping others. So Amanda really demonstrates in this episode what it's like to walk your talk. And what I also want to bring your attention to is you can literally hear in Amanda's voice and feel the shift in her energy from part one of this episode to the second part. And it just goes to show you how unresolved emotions really do interfere with our energy, even when we feel like there's nothing wrong. Amanda didn't feel like there was anything wrong moving into this episode. It all came up as a function of our discussion. So the shift was so palpable to me. It felt really important to point out to you all, because it's happening to you, whether you're aware of it or not. And Amanda is just being so vulnerable and willing to put herself on display to show you all what it's like. Now, once we finished recording this episode, I was connecting with my own spirit guides about the launch date, and I was given information that we couldn't release this episode. And I was told it was not a problem with the content, but there was a part of Amanda that was not aligned with releasing the show. Now, again, this wasn't conscious for Amanda. It was all subconscious. But as you'll recall from my last episode, it does not serve any of us to take action when we are not aligned. So Amanda and I were able to dive into this and gain some wisdom and insight about what was underneath the surface. And I'm pretty sure it was about an hour later that Amanda emailed me to say she had worked through the process and was ready to roll. In the meantime, I knew that this pause wasn't just a message for Amanda, and there was also a message for me in all of this about trust and flow and letting go of agendas and the way we think things should unfold or be, and being aligned with the actions we take and the benefit of being seen transparently, not perfectly. And once we both understood our respective messages, we were ready to roll. Spirit enthusiastically agreed. And so here we are. And I just want to say again how grateful I am to Amanda for her willingness to share herself and her story and about how this entire process unfolded in this way, because this is vulnerable stuff. And this is truly what healing looks like. I mean, healing can look like a lot of different things, but Amanda is such a great example of what it looks like when you practice what you preach and when you draw upon your courage to dive into uncomfortable feelings in the spirit of loving yourself more fully and spreading that love to others. And one final word about this episode. Amanda asked me to point out that when she speaks about her marathon training, she mentioned that she trained for it in 4 weeks, but she actually wanted to clarify that she trained for it in 4 months, not the 4 weeks as is indicated on the podcast. So, with all of this in mind, let's get to it. Amanda is the owner of Yomo Skin and Healing Studio and the author of Train the Mind, Heal the Heart, which was published in April of 2022. Amanda actually began her career as an esthetician, and her passion for people and commitment to living a life of excellence has evolved her career from aesthetics to yoga to CrossFit to energy work and now mindset coaching. Her career path actually developed from a genuine love for people and wanting to know how we heal mentally, physically, and emotionally. So she takes the knowledge she learned from years of study and applies them to her work, now offering a variety of healing modalities in a tranquil environment. Her work in the world and her purpose is to awaken her light and offer the same to others. So Amanda, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So where I would love to start, and I tend to start with all of my guests, is just by asking you to share with our audience how your personal journey with spirit or spirituality unfolded. You know, when and how did you start to awaken in your own life?
Well, I separated into like 4 segments really of my spiritual growth because I was raised in a Mormon family. God was a part of my life growing up. I learned about God, how to pray to God. But towards the end of my years at home, before I left for college, there was just this deep-seated depression that I felt. So when I went off to college, I really kind of left all that behind. I was seeking independence. I really wanted to experience life. So in this phase, I was really in this duality of pleasure and pain and wanting to experience it all. But as you know, though, that pendulum swings for a while, and then you kind of realize that this isn't the way. And towards the end of that, I had this dream, and it's been a reoccurring dream throughout my life. And this was really like a spiritual awakening moment for me, where I had this dream. I was falling down this dark hole, and all these objects were coming down around me, and I was trying to grab onto them, and I couldn't. My hand was going through them all, and I started to panic. I was like, this is real, but I couldn't touch it. And then there was a voice in the background just telling me, nothing is real, nothing is real, nothing is real. And I just kept grasping at things until finally I was like, okay, nothing's real, fine. And that's when I kind of came up out of this dream. And at the time, it really bothered me. It was a very, very unsettling dream. But in this next phase of my life, I went and did a yoga teacher training. So I learned all about Maya, the delusion of life, this relative reality that we're in. And that in this relative reality, nothing is real. What is real is God, higher power, and this is all found within. So that kind of set me off on this renewed spirituality and this new spiritual path, to where I kind of went off on this real self-disciplined, very driven, very, very much movement oriented. So I went from this pleasure-seeking place to this like, ooh, I've got to change, I've got to learn, I've got to grow. So it was go, go, go. I did a ton of marathons during this time and triathlons and CrossFit events. And just really I opened my own business. So a lot of activity. And then so that kind of segued into kind of the stage that I'm in now, which started with the pandemic, where I wrote my book about how I made all these changes, sharing a lot of personal stories within that, how I healed some of my childhood wounds, and just really was about wisdom and growth and purifying my mind. So that's kind of what the short version, like what my spiritual process was that brought me to now, where I feel much more simplified in my life and in my mind. Fitness is still a thing for me, but it's not as important. My spirituality and living a God-centered life and sharing that message of nothing out here is real, meaning nothing outside of us will bring us happiness. And I've had to learn that lesson many, many times. In each phase, it's been present. So there's these repeated messages for us that come throughout our life. Through dreams or messages or intuition, but they're constantly there. And we relearn these lessons until spirit knows we have it. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that is my spiritual growth evolution.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you're right? Because we just keep healing in levels and layers. And so we just keep spiraling down as we keep drilling further and further into what we're here to learn about and what we're here to heal. And one of the things that you've mentioned that I would love, if you're okay with it, to share a little bit more about, when you talk about this God-centered life, going from being Mormon to now perhaps redefining God in another way and what that means for you. I think so many people can relate to maybe being raised under, the guise of a specific religion or doctrine, or rules within a church. And then there's a tipping point at which they start questioning how that's serving them in some way or not serving them. And I'm curious if you would be willing to talk a little bit about what that transition or that shift was like for you, and how did you embody this new sense of what God now means to you?
Yeah, well, growing up, the God that I was raised with always felt like it was separate from me and outside of me. A loving God, but also a judging God. And this idea of living this perfect life there was a lot of pressure around that. And living this ideal as a woman in this authoritarian, really patriarchal, structured religion. So finding God again, it was hard for me to even say that word for the longest time. I connected first to my higher self. That was closer for me. I could feel that within me. And then that grew into feeling that in everything. So, and then that morphing into being able to use the word God and not feel like any trapped emotions around that or any unhealed issues around the way I was raised arise with that. So there was definitely this inner journey of finding it for myself through meditation, introspection, a lot of internal work in feeling that for myself. So that presence of the infinite or spirit or divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it, it's within all matter. That's the conclusion that I have come to with it, that it's in all matter. It's within me, it's within you. And when I reconnected to it, it just felt so much more personal to me, to where I can close my eyes in meditation and I can feel God's love all around me. And I don't ever feel alone because I know that's always there.
Yeah, I think it's such an important reflection, because I think a lot of us are raised to believe that God is this thing outside of us. And you're right, the coming back home to ourselves is that reconnection with the truth of who we really are, knowing that we are God, God is us, that it's not separate, that we're all connected. So thank you for sharing that. And, along those lines, I find myself curious about, the physical movement. You were really drawn, right, to fitness. And there's something when we think about embodiment and being here now and being grounded and rooted, there is something I think about physical activity that really does help quiet the mind and just allows us to be in our bodies. And so as I think about the work that you're doing in the world, which is right, helping people develop this mental toughness and helping with train their mind. How has fitness played a part in that journey for you?
Yeah, it was a huge part in my healing journey. I started my physical activity after I got divorced. So I was going through a divorce. I was falling back onto old habits of drinking and just really feeling a lot of really intense emotions. And when I kind of hit rock bottom with that, I knew there was something else that I had to find to get me through it. And I just didn't know what to do. I felt so stuck. And I ended up at an AA meeting, and it just felt depressing to me. And I left thinking there's got to be another way I can get through this. And I went to the gym and I started doing that regularly, where I'd start working out. And then I ended up signing up for a marathon. I was like, why not? Just go big, right?
Yeah.
I could hardly run down the block. I was still smoking cigarettes occasionally at the time. But I was like, I'm going to do this. And I trained in like 4 weeks and ran like, it's amazing to me to think about how fast I ran that with the amount of training that I did. But I was determined. I was like, I'm just going to run every day. And that movement taught me about pain. It taught me how to work through pain, work through the thoughts in my mind, and how to segment things to where I could do it. So I'd run a minute, I'd run 10 minutes, I'd walk a minute. I'd run 10 minutes, I'd walk a minute. And I did that through my whole training process. And then after that, I got into CrossFit, which there again, it just taught me a lot about working with discomfort and also connecting me to other people who are also growth-minded people and surrounding me with community.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like when it comes to especially training for marathons or even CrossFit, the few CrossFit junkies that I know, I mean, there is a certain level of discipline, right? That's required in that training. And I don't think training our mind is any different from that. And yet we can be disciplined in certain aspects of our life, but when it comes to our thoughts and it comes to the mind, I don't feel that we bring that necessary discipline to how we allow our minds to run rampant with these thoughts that just don't serve us. Is that what you find? Was that what you were finding with yourself? Is that what you find with others? What led you to this whole platform of needing to train the mind?
Yeah. So when I sat down to write Train the Mind, Heal the Heart, I went through like, okay, what works? What's effective when I go in and work out? Well, when I have a list of things I need to do, usually with a CrossFit workout, it's like, and as many rounds as possible of something, or you're doing a certain number of different movements one after another. So I thought, well, how can I segment this in the same way with mind training? So I made it step by step. So the first step is deconstructing our emotions and investigating emotions. And then the second step is acceptance of where we are, accepting now and the present situation. The next step is intention. So tapping into what we want and the feeling that's under that want. And then gratitude is the next step, finding what's going right or what's not going wrong or what you're grateful for. And then the last step is taking action towards what you want. So it creates this intentionality around our decision making and really concentrates in on what is really truly most important instead of these impulsive desires that come from the senses. So we perceive things from this outside world with our senses, our five senses, and then we react to them. So we're not usually using a lot of discrimination or intelligence in some cases when we're just acting instinctively or impulsively. So the program walks you through these steps so you can make more conscious choices with intelligence and discrimination. And then the meditation piece taps you into your intuition and just this higher sense of self.
So do you have an example of how you've moved yourself through this process yourself with like maybe some story or some real life example that people could connect to see the unfolding?
Oh, yes. So many times. So cravings are a big one. So if you think about it, when you try to change your life and do something, make an improvement, say you want to change your diet. The first time I did a fitness diet challenge, I caved to some macaroni and cheese like a weekend or so. So you have these cravings, these desires, and they get more intense as soon as you eliminate things. So things get difficult. It's one of the challenges when we make changes and transformation to growth. So Let's see if I can think of probably a better example, one that's really hits a little closer to the heart. So I think we've all had dietary experiences with changing our lives. But really, when I look back, like one of the most significant changes I made was taking care of myself and not sabotaging myself with self-hating thoughts and the insecurities that I came into my adulthood with. So the emotional healing process around that, and this led to going down the road of drinking and really doing self-destructive things to my body in order to kind of numb myself out. So when I was trying to quit drinking, I just felt like it just had this real strong hold on my mind. Like no matter what I did, it just took control over my mind. So in investigating those emotions on what was causing that craving, what was there for me, it was this just not wanting to feel this grief of my divorce, the grief of my life not turning out the way that I thought it was going to. All these preconceived notions of what life was supposed to be for me just didn't happen. So there was a lot of grief around that. So that exploring that emotion, that heavy emotion, which is avoided with all these things like alcohol, that we when we don't want to feel something, we use something to numb it or to give us that charge. So once I tapped into that grief and was able to really touch into that, then I could accept where I was. I could accept like, okay, this is my situation. Whether I like it or not, my marriage is ending. Whether I like it or not, I'm not going to have children. Whether or not I like it or not, this is where I stand. So that acceptance piece was huge for me in moving forward. And then finding what I wanted. Well, what do I want for my life? I want to do something meaningful. I don't want to just waste away and in this grief and sadness and feel sorry for myself. So I said, well, what can I do? Okay, well, I can run. That was okay. That's what I can do. And then it was, well, I can open up my own business. So it's just like, I can take care of myself. I can provide safety and security for myself, and I can heal. And the gratitude portion of it was just kind of seeing what was going right in that situation. That was really difficult at that time to find what was going right because I felt so bad a lot of the time. But the people that were around me, the sun in the sky, there's all the little things. What's not going wrong? I have a place to live. These little things that are really big things when you think about it from a survival perspective. I had lots of people who loved me in my life. I had a way to provide for myself. So it's like the gratitude piece is really important when you're going through challenge to move you forward. And then taking action in making decisions that align with what I wanted. And that was to be healthy and to love my body, to love myself, and to stop doing these things that hurt me. So that was a huge transformation in my life, that where I used the mind training steps I didn't have them written out at that time, but when I look back, that's what I did. And so when I looked back at my past to develop this program, I looked back at every single time that I made a change and dropped something that wasn't serving me, to embrace the unknown sometimes, to open up for what was the greater possibilities for my life.
Yeah, I love so many things about what you're saying, because I feel like what you're describing is so common in humans, right? You're describing the resistance that comes up when we are either not leaning into the emotions, right? When we're not in acceptance of what our life looks like or where we are or what the circumstances that are unfolding are. And so when we're not in acceptance, we just start pushing against what is. And to your point, it really requires this leaning into the emotion, understanding what the emotion is trying to tell you so that you don't marinate in it and you can move through the emotion to get to the place where you're ready to take that next step, which in your case, you're like, well, I can run, I can take care of myself. And it's so beautiful to hear you say how empowered you felt to become healthy, because I think so many people have this intention to be healthy, but it is rampant with self-sabotage at the same time, right? It's like we want to be healthy and we want to eat the whole box of cookies at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I can relate to, you're talking about alcohol. For me, it was binge eating. So I can completely relate to the numbing out and how we use these different substances, whatever they might be, in order to move away from what emotion is telling us. us, as opposed to looking at it in a way that I think you've articulated really well, which is it's directional. It's pointing us in a direction of something that we actually desire, that we can now set an intention around. And it sounds like you've brought a lot of attention to those intentions. And that's where the alignment is between your intention and then the steps you seem to take every day towards making those intentions a reality.
Yeah, and on the emotional level too, there's so many trapped emotions that we're all carrying that make these urges so powerful that they somewhat hijack the mind. The limiting emotions they can be feeling worthless. They can be overwhelmed, which we all deal with this in this life. It can be desire, really strong desire. We can accumulate these through this life. We can bring them forward from past lives, and they magnetize certain experiences toward us. We can inherit them from our family members. And this kind of segues into some of the energy work that I do, because during this last phase of my development, I learned some really great tools that I utilize with my clients as well to help clear out these trapped emotions. And then I wrote up a little bit of a step-by-step in the program on how one can do this themselves, where we're identifying the root cause of these emotions so that we can clear them out ourselves.
Yeah. And I'm curious, as you learn to dive into your own emotions, as you're understanding the true root causes of what might be causing any of these blockages or different things, how has spirit guided you through your own process with all of this?
Wow. I know spirit has been with me this entire time. It really, truly is amazing to look back and to see just the progress through each of these phases, because you don't jump right to the end at the beginning, right? You have to go through these phases. So I have felt spirit in my life. And right before I left my husband, I took a Reiki class. And this was another reconnection with spirit when I was attuned to universal energies, it's called in the world of Reiki, or God energy, divine intelligence, depending on what term you want to use. But when I was attuned to that, I started feeling the frequency of energy off of people after my second class. So I'm an esthetician, so I do facials, which incorporates a lot of massage. So I was working with people every day, and like anything that you do a lot, you get better at it. So I was incorporating Reiki in with all of my treatments once I was attuned. It just kind of naturally came through. And one day I had my hands on this woman's legs. I was doing a foot massage, and I put my hands on her feet, and I startled, and I looked down, and I thought my hands were going to be raising up and down, because that's what it felt like. It felt like the energy was pushing me off of her legs. Then I just attuned into that more and more the more I worked with that. And that was back in 2010. So I've been working with Reiki for quite a while. But with the energy and spirit, the way that it feels is it's expanding and contracting. It feels expanding, contracting, and then it'll go in a spiral motion. So feeling that sensation and knowing that I could tune into that always made me feel like I was connected with spirit at even a stronger level. So as I continued to work with those energies and tuning into those energies on a daily basis throughout my workday, just brought in that real solid sense that I was connected to something greater than me.
Yeah. And has working with that energy changed how you navigate your own life on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's good and bad, right? It kind of makes me feel too connected to people sometimes. Like, I think it kind of startles people that I feel so connected to them so quickly. But at the same time, it draws me in closer to those relationships that are really near and dear to me.
Yeah.
But yes, it has navigated me in my life. Absolutely.
Yeah. And are there any, as you think back on your life, like, are there certain challenges or these aha moments along the way that, like, if you had to relive all over again, you would, because they've moved you into this particular juncture or space?
Yes. Well, the first one I think about is my yoga training in Thailand. I went to Thailand for a month, and I did a very traditional yoga training there. So we did a lot of chanting, a lot of meditating, and a lot of learning about about the philosophy of yoga, Vedic philosophy. And one of the most poignant moments, there's a couple that really resonate for me. But walking into class and seeing this board that said, you are the thinker, not the thought, the feeler, not the emotion, the perceiver, not the perceived. I remember standing in front of that and just like, it blew my mind. It was like, what? I am not my thoughts. I always identified with my thoughts. I always identified with my body as who I was. So to start thinking of myself as on the soul level, that I'm just in this body and this is my vehicle. This is not who I am. That was a very poignant moment for me that I would go back. And then at the end of my training, there was dear man, my Swami, who was just so sweet. I was sitting in the ashram and he walked up to me kind of out of the blue, kind of floated up to me, and he didn't talk a lot. And he held his hand out and dropped a lightning bug in my hand. And it was just like this magical moment of this light in my hand. And it was like my light that was dropped in my hand. And it felt like that moment just transformed me. And I was never the same after that.
Yeah, I can feel that in my body as you're talking about it. I'm getting chills. It's
beautiful.
It's wild how these physical representations in life can really help us to see what we most need to see within ourselves, right?
Yes.
So sure. I'm curious about, it sounds like a very powerful moment to realize like you are the thinker, you are not your thoughts, right? You're the feeler, right? Not the emotion itself. So as I think about the work that you do you incorporate these principles now into the work that you're doing with your clients? And if so, how are you doing that? And what challenges are you seeing as you're working with people?
Yeah. So my business is called Yomo. So I wanted yoga to be a part of that. So it's like yoga, kind of your motivation and the yoga philosophy around that. So bringing in this idea of inner peace and outer beauty, how we manifest ourselves to the world. And in my treatments, I always start with a guided meditation. And I always bring in energy work. And my clients are aware of this. I always talk to them about the energy work that we do, and that it just brings in this higher, stronger form of relaxation to their busy, crazy lives that they're all living. And this moment of peace, this hour of peace and relaxation. And then I'm also doing specific energy work treatments. So that would be more with facials, with the energy treatments. Then I'm absolutely more concentrated on doing healing work. So I can really dive into the energy work and clearing the chakra lines, which is the energy body, or working with trapped emotions and clearing trapped emotions, whatever the person needs for their session. And I'm also working with angel vibrations. You mentioned that early on. So those started coming into me recently. So I was working with more color spectrum vibrations to clear the chakra line. And then I would reach this point where the chakra wouldn't be cleared. And so I'd be like, okay, spirit, what else do I use? So I started using like deity vibrations. And then I get like, no, it's still not cleared. Okay, what else is there? Angel vibrations? Okay, then I get like a yes. So I started working with angel vibrations in that way. And then I'll go down a list and like a yes or no for whatever angels need to be used that day. And it works with intention. Energy work and healing it all centers around intentions and thoughts in the mind. So if you're thinking, for example, I'm never going to heal from this injury, then it literally could slow that healing process down. Whereas when you're thinking, my body's healing itself, my body knows how to heal, my body knows how to regenerate, then you're encouraging every cell of your body to work with you to heal your body. So every cell of your being responds to these thoughts. So as an energy healer, I've worked really hard to purify my own being and myself as a conduit, so I can raise these vibrations to attune to higher vibrations. So when I'm tuning into spectrum vibrations, those are going to be more at a grosser level. When I'm tuning into deity vibrations, well, I meditate and I connect to those every day. So I know that I have more of an ability to tune into them. And same with the angel vibrations. It's coming into me. I'm being offered this to use as a tool, but it's all coming from something. It's all coming from God. So it's not me. I'm just the conduit as the healer. So when I'm working with my guests, what I use is based on what's coming up for them that day or that session.
Yeah. And when it comes to the power of our thoughts, you're right. Whatever we believe, and so it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think we can underestimate the power of looking at what our thoughts are telling us and looking at the physical reality and how we've created that as a function of what we really believe, consciously or unconsciously, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I think the hiccup there is the acceptance of when things aren't going the way we want them to go and being able to let go of that attachment. Because sometimes we can get real, I know I have in my life been really attached to a certain idea of the way I wanted things to be. Like in this, right before the pandemic, I went on a trip to Boston where I spent some time at this CrossFit gym there that was amazing. It was like everything that I could have dreamed for. As far as like a community and this idealized place with these idealized people that were all so fit and seemingly so happy and wonderful, right? So when I came home right before the pandemic to my 300 square foot apartment living by myself, it's like I started to develop this real longing inside of me for that place. Well, what my mind had attached to is that place. And it was real torture, because I knew that I couldn't be there. I knew that that was something that was a fleeting moment in my life that I should be grateful that I had that experience. And I was, but my mind could not let it go. So this is the deepest work that I've personally done in my life thus far. It's the thought, the attachment that links you to something that you just cannot let go of no matter what you do. It's that the itch you have to scratch, so to speak.
Yeah.
Energy. So it inspired me to write my book. When meeting challenges, it's always a great tool to ask yourself, what can I create? How can I learn, grow, or evolve? So whether it's an attachment or any sort of obstacle you're facing, those questions can help you move through it and make it about you instead of mistakenly making it about the other person or the place or the thing, the object, which is what you do at the beginning. You want to find a reason for it. You want to find a reason that all these things happened to bring you to that point. Or that's, for me, it was like, why was I brought to that place? Why did that happen? Why did I get so attached? So in working through this, I wrote my book, which really greatly inspired that. But then after that, it still lingered. So I was like, there's more here. There's more here. And I just kept digging and digging using the tools that I developed. I came across emotion code, which is the emotional clearing technique. I came across pranic healing. So you asked me earlier how guides guided me through certain times in my life. This was a huge one for me when I was just really deeply asking and seeking and like, how do I move past this? Meditating deeply every day, praying, just everything to just move on. So in moving through this attachment, I just kind of, with these methods that I found during this time, just kept uncovering layer after layer after layer. A big one was my self-worth, knowing that I was worth more than what my mind was settling me on. And that, again, that message of there's nothing outside of me that's going to bring me happiness. It's all inside. But then as I kept digging, more and more and more came up. And it ended with probably the biggest healing that I have experienced in my life. I started waking up at night with these really strong, powerful images of being sexually abused as a child. And I would wake up and I just feel these just strong emotions. I'd be reliving the moment in my mind. So I'd wake up, I'd sit on my cushion and I just use my tools to clear. I'd sit with whatever feelings were coming up and I just start clearing them off with emotion code and pranic healing, using angel vibrations or whatever was coming up for me at the time to move it through. And I just kept doing this until every night that it was happening, I was waking up in the middle of the night with these images over and over and over and over and over again. And then finally, when I got through it all, it was the most freeing, peaceful feeling I'd ever felt. And it was like this answer. It was the answer I was looking for. Like, why did this particular incident like caused me so much attachment. And attachment was something that come up for me prior in my life at other times that just kind of didn't ever seem to make sense why I would be so attached to someone or something. But this time I finally was like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and I'm going to figure out what this is. And it took a long time to get me to this point of what it really truly was. And I would have never associated it with that. I'd sort of remembered this happening, but I'd shoved it so far out of my mind and put it in the past and just didn't really think much of it. But when it came up during my healing process, I realized it was a lot more involved and over a longer period of time than I'd ever realized. My mind had really disassociated from it. And I bring this up because I want people to know that if they're having things happen in their minds that don't make sense, these emotions, like this one was the emotion that it would cause a real like sexual arousal that didn't make sense for me. And it was because the sexual abuse caused this like mislink in my mind with attraction. So how this manifested in my life is I would either become really attached to people or I would completely avoid relationships altogether because I was afraid of that attraction. So in healing this, it solved a lot of questions for me. And then I called my parents about it. And I was like, did this happen? And they said, they validated it, that it happened and that they just didn't want it to hurt me. So they didn't ever talk about it, which that brought up a lot of emotional abandonment issues for me too. That was another level of my healing. Like I said, it all comes in layers. Nothing's going to come up for you until you're ready for it. Like this came up when I was ready for it and I knew what to do with it. And I had the tools to heal it and clear it for myself. So since then, I have just felt so much freer in my life. And I've had more clients come in and share it, like without knowing my experience, have had similar things happen to them. So it's amazing how Spirit has used this experience for me. And now I can use it to try to help other people understand what they're going through and heal and know that they can heal. This isn't something that has to hijack every single one of their relationships for the rest of their lives.
So I just want to thank you for sharing your story and your vulnerability with us, because I know that that's not easy to do. And you do it in the name of helping other people. And what I want to share with listeners that you wouldn't see behind the scenes is what happened every single time Amanda was saying she wants you to know that this does not have to hijack your life. Our connection went out immediately. And I am a big believer that this ego energy of the mind can intercept and interfere in our lives. And it happened twice at the same exact moment. And I know that that is purposeful for us to be able to see how the mind interferes, because the truth is, right, Amanda did this work. You went into the work. You leaned into this very distressing event in your life. And I think one, it highlights how powerful and potent the mind is, right? Like we can literally repress, suppress, deny. We can hide so many things from ourselves. The mind is that powerful, right? And then when we try to change these patterns, that's when the ego really interferes and tries to do whatever it can to intercept our forward momentum, our forward movement. And so it's not a coincidence to me that, right, as we're trying to empower the audience, like that this does not have to define you. This does not have to own you. It's like that energy comes in. It's like, nope, we're going to cut off that connection. We're going to cut off the connection. This is why the ego is known as the great separator, right? Because it's like, let me cut you off from who you really are. And it's not to diminish or minimize or invalidate any experience or trauma that anyone has been through, because it absolutely contributes to the person that you are. And it's so beautiful that you've been able to work through it to a point that you're now able to help other people move through that. And I wonder if that gives you a sense of purposefulness. It doesn't make it any easier to move through, but I wonder if that purposefulness of the experience, or however you might, I don't want to put words in your mouth, however you might see the purpose of why this happened.
Yeah, I have to hold back my excitement with guests in a way, because I'm like, yes, you can heal, you can feel good again. You can feel like you can venture into relationships and not get into toxic relationships. You can see the red flags. Your emotions aren't hijacking you in these situations when you need to get out or whatever it is. Like, so I kind of have to suppress this excitement around them when not the excitement around their trauma, of course, but just more around their healing. So just holding space for that. So absolutely, like it gives me a sense of purpose. Like, okay, this is some way I can help people and offer them tools. And I shouldn't use that word help. I've really, as a healer or a light worker, I've learned that I can't be a healing bulldozer on people, that I have to give others their space for healing. So I've switched to using more of terms around support and offering tools, where here I'm a conduit working with them when they're here, but it's more about like giving them tools to heal on their own as well.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, right? Because sometimes I think as people that have a vested interest in our own growth and involvement, and when we see the progress that we've made or how, these different spiritual tools and practices have impacted or changed our own lives, there is this excitement around wanting everyone to experience it. And I agree with you, because the thing I've learned and continue to learn in this helping profession is that we can't want someone to heal more than they want to heal themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest hurdle in the work that I have found is, okay, here it is. Like, it's healing is in your hands. You have to want it. And no one can take away your free will. Even with working with these higher spirits, like they can't take away our free will. We have our free will, and that is ours. And it's our decision when we're ready to heal, or whatever level we are at in moving forward or taking a pause. There's a balance there in that effort and ease with healing. And yeah, giving people respecting their boundaries and where they're at mentally, physically, emotionally is a lesson that I've had to learn doing this work. Can't be a healing tornado, like heal.
Yeah.
Which I've definitely been that way in the past with people. So more my family members, but
right. And that goes back to what you were saying about attachment, right? I mean, I think that's where whether it's codependent behavior or, it's like, if you're okay, then I'm okay. That's at a basic level, the codependent behavior, right?
okay,
Like
I lean more towards the codependent behavior. Absolutely. Recovered codependent. I hope so, but
yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point, right? Like, it can be healed when we start seeing these patterns. And I know I'm still looking at all the different ways. I'm a recovering codependent too. And I think I'm noticing all of these different levels and layers to the codependence and things that start to show up just in these everyday small interactions that are like, oh, wow. I mean, I wouldn't have even thought that I was upset that someone else got upset over something, but it's those little tweaks. And that's the levels and the layers of the healing to come full circle that you're talking about, right? It's like continuing to watch how these patterns really unfold for ourselves in our own lives. And I think your point is well taken in that everybody has everything they need within them to do the work. It's just how are we accessing that resourcing within ourselves, and that's where I think the mind comes in and intercepts in such damaging and abusive ways, right? It tells us that we can't do things and gives us a laundry list of reasons why or limitations that we then start to argue for. I mean, I think I was reading The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and he talks about the ego mind as this abusive roommate. And he was like, you would never put up with this from a human being. And yet we tolerate that abusive self-talk ourselves, and we don't even. So let's just start by being real, I guess, about what just happened. So I feel like I need to recap for the listeners. As we were talking, and the last thing we think we recorded was about the untethered soul. And the point I was trying to make was about how, we would never want to live with an actual human roommate who beat us up and abused us. And right, like we would be getting out of that situation at all costs. And yet we do not hold ourselves and our self-talk to that same level of respect. We don't often have that same level of respect and love for ourselves that we would demand from other people. So we allow ourselves to get away with this behavior that is so unloving, so lacking in any kind of, compassion or respect. And so it was interesting because every single time in this conversation that Amanda and I were talking about the ego, our internet went down and we lost the connection. And I don't know, Amanda, how many, I think we just got kicked off 4 or 5 times in moments. And so for me, as I was feeling into the situation, Amanda was feeling into the situation, we realized that we needed to just stop and we needed to pay attention to the message from spirit. And given that this podcast is all about being guided, we would not be walking our talk if we didn't acknowledge that this is where we had to pivot in our conversation today to really look at, there's a reason that the internet has been fine for 40 minutes and all of a sudden we're getting cut off. And I always take these things to be some sort of message. And Amanda, if you're open to sharing, I feel like it was a mirror of where you were feeling cut off.
So the emotions that have been coming up for me lately when I've been doing my healing work is humiliation. Well, I've been putting my work out there with this book, in Train the Mind, Heal the Heart. In each chapter, I tell a very personal story. Backtrack to, I published the book about a year ago, but then I had an opportunity to share my chapters on a CrossFit website. So I'm putting these really vulnerable stories out to a community that is supportive, but also can be really maybe not so open to my view on things or my stories. You just don't know, right?
Yeah.
So it's been this accumulation of panic around how people will perceive me, and you don't get feedback. And as much as I've worked through these making statements for myself around letting this go, that it doesn't matter, I'm doing this to offer tools of support to help others. If this story resonates with somebody, I feel really called to do this, to overcome these fears. But my insecurities go back to childhood, where I felt rejected in a lot of ways in my family of origin. Not always their fault, but that's how I felt. I felt rejected within my religion. I felt rejected in school, in high school, and whether or not these stories were all 100% true, that's how I internalized my environment of never quite fitting in. So these feelings of being humiliated in a way of shaming me down to something really small has something that I've really fought resiliently against in my adulthood. It's part of the reason why I did this. I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put my story out there, and people might not like it, but I know I need to do this. Well, so now all of that's said and done, and it just seems like the accumulation of this feeling over the last year, it's bubbling up. So I've been doing my clearing work with it, but every day it comes back in some way. It's oh my gosh, humiliation again. Why won't this go away? Why am I not getting to the root of this? So then this happens, and Lindsay was able to give me some real insight on it, that I was bypassing feeling into it. And that is a key. I know that's key in healing, is that feeling into it. I have not wanted to feel into humiliation or rejection, which is a major hurdle for me that I've been trying to work through.
Thank you so much for being willing to share that, because this is just real, right? This is what we all do. Yeah. We can see our patterns. We can dissect them with our minds. We can think about absolutely. It. And the truth is it doesn't even need to be that hard. We just need to feel the feeling, which is, where in the physical body are you actually noticing the sensation of rejection, the sensation of humiliation, right? And every emotion, I talk about this a lot on this podcast, that every emotion just is a message from spirit. And when we're feeling embarrassed, when we're feeling humiliated, the message from spirit is it's just a call for more self-acceptance, right? Loving who we are and leaning into our uniqueness and just really embracing all of our imperfections as absolutely perfect, right? Whatever we're judging. And it was a beautiful moment, even for me, right? Because as a podcast host, I start being oh my gosh, I'm wasting her time. No, we can't get through this recording. How am I going to honor her story?
But I'm it was me. It was my fault. It was my trapped emotions that were causing this.
But it was a beautiful opportunity for the both of us to really connect. And I just want to really articulate to people that this is how spirit works, right? Mm-hmm. Even this conversation, spirit certainly got our attention by cutting off the connection multiple times. And literally the minute that we said, hold on, we need to pause. There is a message here from spirit because this keeps happening. The internet connection was 100% stable. And we literally worked through everything we needed to work through. And that is completely spirit at play. And so in 5 minutes, you and I had this beautiful interaction where you were able to move through your healing. I'm able to now reflect on, this is what living with spirit, in my opinion, is. It's not about, right, delivering a perfect podcast. It's not about, saying certain things and making sure certain, having an agenda, but it's about being real. And this was the real experience that unfolded today. And spirit is going to work through every interaction we have.
I just had a huge aha moment so Lindsay took me through a little guided meditation around healing my inner child around this. And this is what just came through right in this moment, that that rejection was felt when I wasn't protected after being assaulted. It was pretended like it didn't even happen. And it really invalidated me as a person and caused me not to value myself or love myself because no one else was looking out for me in that moment. That's what the internal message was recorded within my soul. So every time I try to venture out, it's like, nope, go back in. You're unsafe.
So that's beautiful awareness. And what I want to say to you too is it's about, and I know you know this, it's about you holding yourself and your inner child through it now and letting her know that what happened to her then, right, wasn't okay, but you've got her now.
It's also like how it's so important to have facilitators, like you working with me working with other people, how we need each other. So I can do all the inner work for myself, but what you did for me, it's a miracle, that I couldn't have done for myself. This is why I do the work. And I can probably speak for you and you too. Like we shine the light on these things for each other. And this is where the miracles lie. And this is how God works through us in helping each other. I just love that this happened because you said that with this being real and raw, like this is what you do instead of like trying to force this thing. Well, let's try to get the connection to work. Let's try to get the connection to work. Wait a second. Let's pause and investigate. And that's exactly what each person has to do in their own healing process. Like, why does this thing keep coming up for me? Instead of forcing through it or making about something outside of us, it's here. It's always here.
Yep. It's so true. It is always in the heart. And I'm laughing because my mentor calls it, right? We either go to the shame, blame, victim game, pointing fingers outside of ourselves, right? To like, that's the problem. That's the problem. That's the problem. And then we feel victimized by our experiences. Or the other thing she says that always makes me laugh. It's like, nothing to see here, right? Like nothing to see here. I don't want to lean into that, right? Because that's what the ego does, right? It distracts us however it can. And that's, I think what you pointed out, is so powerful. Like we all have these little nuggets of wisdom for each other. So I believe it's divine that there was a friend of mine who put us, right, and a mutual friend of both of ours connected us. We didn't know each other before this conversation. And it's amazing that I really believe that there was a greater purpose than just the podcast that brought us together today. If you had been working through this and it's coming up and it's coming up and it's coming up and it's not clearing, Spirit's going to put the right people in your path to help you move and address whatever it is that you need to address because they want to help you with your healing. And if we ask for that help, all we have to do is be open to how that help might receive us, right? It's not, you didn't have to pay for a session. You just happened to agree to a podcast and the information you needed came at the time that you needed it, right? And that's how spirit works.
It's amazing. And that's how things have worked for me throughout my healing process as well. And if I would give anyone any advice as far as how to heal, it'd be similar to what you just said, like ask. Say, I want to heal from this. I don't want to carry this anymore. How do I heal?
And I think it also just goes to show, right? Like there's so much stuff underneath the surface. We were talking about this, that we don't even know how it's affecting us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think when it does come to, and myself included, I put myself in this category. We wear so many masks in our society. We are taught that it's not okay to be who we are, that we need to conform, that we need to fit in, that we need to follow rules. And we spend so much of our lives trying to fit into these boxes that society has deemed to be acceptable or fill in the blank. And now we get to unlearn all of these things. I feel like authenticity is just this uncovering of who we really are. You know, when I was going through my own kids' yoga and mindfulness training, they would talk about how, you know, it's like our whole life, we just had this mud slung at us and it covered up our light. It covered up the essence of who we truly are. And now as we start to bring awareness and consciousness to all of these different things, it's like the Windex. We're just, it's not that we're changing, we're changing in the sense that we're evolving, but we already had this essence within us. It just got dimmed by all of this stuff, you know, beliefs that we've adopted or beliefs that have been projected on us, whatever it is. And now we get to uncover who we truly are. And there's fear around being different. There's fear around stepping into anything that differs or strays from what society has deemed to be acceptable. And I know I have not been immune to any of those challenges, but we can move through them with more grace and ease when we are willing to feel the feeling. But I do think when we have those deep, deep wounds, like you've articulated, right? There's trauma there. That is some of the hardest stuff for us to be with, right? And I think oftentimes having someone who can hold space for you, to hold you in a place where you might feel a little bit safer, you're still doing the work. I'm not doing the work. You're doing the work, but hopefully it helps, right? Add a layer of safety or security in that it's okay to hold myself and be held in this place of feeling and ultimately releasing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I just can't tell you how many days I've just driven home saying, I'm going to be okay. I can do this. Like just giving myself this pep talk when this has really uncovered for me. Even that was a bit of an avoidance of getting deeper into the real emotions that need to come up for me.
Yeah. And I think you're pointing out something also really important, which is we do need to encourage ourselves. We do need to support ourselves. So that's an amazing way to use your mind, right? Like I think you've trained yourself to and trained your mind to your platform, right? Like to really do that. I know that's something I have to actively work at because that's not as natural for me I'm really good at encouraging others, but when it comes to encouraging myself, I fall flat. And so that's something I really have to work at. But what you're saying, it's a both and. So it's like, let's encourage ourselves, but we also have to be willing to get really honest with ourselves about what we're feeling and have the courage to face it. And it takes courage to lean into these uncomfortable emotions because this is why most people aren't doing it. Like we lean away from pain. We don't really think it's that fun moving into it, right? But that's where the transformation happens.
I think this is a great segue into talking about duality, the pleasure and pain cycle, and why meditation and focusing on spirit, God, that oneness of everything with that internal practice is so important because it takes you away from that duality of seeking pleasure, avoiding pain and discomfort, because you can always meet at this point of equilibrium. And knowing that you have that, it makes this work doable. It makes me being able to sit here with that trauma, with that memory, with the feelings of being shunned and humiliated and shamed. It makes it possible for me to sit here with that. Otherwise, you just go back to whatever feels good, right? Go eat that cookie or have that drink, a glass of wine or whatever it is. Like, why would you do it? And there again, trading the known for the unknown. Because the unknown, there's the greatest freedom and love and peace that comes with moving through these trapped emotions, these limiting feelings, and really embracing the authenticity of who we really are, this infinite soul.
Yeah. And I think that it gets easier the more you do it, right? The more you trust, the more you allow yourself to lean into those feelings. And I think everything is purposeful, but it's all directional, right? So the pain points us in the direction of our pleasure, right? And we wouldn't, I think the pleasure motivates us moving through pain, right? If we know that we can see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I know myself, I've gone through many cycles of dark nights of the soul where it's hard to see the light sometimes. And whether it's somebody who's helped hold space for me and helped coach me or move me through to a different perspective or place, once you come out the other side, I think there's a new level of fortification and in the foundation that you're creating for yourself that makes it much easier moving forward. And the amount of time it takes us to bounce back reduces. And
you get to know the reward. And you were asking me about like the physical pain and doing CrossFit workouts and that sort of thing. It's helped me in doing this work because even in those events, like getting that medal at the end of the race or feeling a victory at the end of a workout, it's not as refined and high consciousness as doing the emotional work, but it's the same, it's the reward. So as I moved through my journey, I've got these little rewards each step of the way, which kept me going and kept me evolving. So now the reward is more peace. Like that's what God feels like. It feels like peace. It feels like I know what love feels like now. I know that love feels like peace. It doesn't feel like this anxiety, this humiliation, this worthlessness, the way I had defined love in my mind before. I know love feels like peace. And if I keep doing this work, I'll keep feeling that more intensely and more intensely. And it's just like that reward just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. I feel like I don't even want to add anything else because that's beautiful and it's true. And I think to your whole platform around training the mind, the more focus we bring and discipline we bring to pushing that ego aside, the more peace we truly experience.
So discipline balanced with self-compassion.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. So what advice would you offer to people just starting out on their spiritual journey?
Oh, just starting out, start a spiritual practice in the morning where you're reading spiritual work or meditating, yoga, like anything that's diving you inward, and then do the next step that you can do.
Yeah. And you talked about that so nicely throughout this. You just took the next right step, whatever felt like the next right step. You didn't need to know 800 steps in front of you. You just took the next right step. And I truly feel like that's what spirit shows us. It's just the next step.
And it's even okay if you get it wrong. You just have to be willing to say, well, hey, I got that wrong and I need to go a different way. And that's one of the most difficult things to do that I found along my path. But each step of the way, if I hadn't have done that, it wouldn't have moved me to the next spot. So you've got to take the risk to make the choice in the moment. But you also have to be willing to say like, oh, that way maybe wasn't the right way.
Well, and I always end with this question, but I feel like this whole conversation was a little bit of a magical experience. But I was going to say, how else do you see, magic and miracles playing out in your own life?
Oh, wow. I feel like every day is a miracle. Life is a miracle. God is a miracle. Yeah, the moments and experiences that I've been having lately, this one included, have just brought this sense of miracles happening every single day and seeing them. It's an up-leveling of a gratitude journal as I've started a miracle journal of just writing down the things that happen that are miraculous, that demonstrate God's presence in my life.
That's such a great idea. I feel like there's been times where I've done that as well. And the more we can train our minds to find those things, the easier it is to stay in that vibration of gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah, I had this really beautiful miracle that happened as I was writing. I started writing during the pandemic, and it first just started out as meditation blogs. I was recording a meditation and writing a little excerpt, and then it turned into Train the Mind, Heal the Heart. But in the middle process of it, these women came into my life. One of them was a client that I'd met through a mutual friend, and a woman that she was working with. And they started doing some newsletters for my business during the pandemic. And then it turned into them putting everything together to be able to publish my book. I would have had no idea how to do it. I was just writing. It was huge and lengthy. And one of the women, Anna, she edited it. And the other woman, Jacqueline, she put everything together. Found the cover artist, the workbook, helped me put the workbook together. Like, she knew how to put all the pieces together. And the fact that that book was published is an absolute miracle that these people came into my life right at the right time that I needed them and put all the pieces together for me. It was absolutely miraculous.
That's amazing. And I want to say to you, like, this is a message for me because I'm in the process of writing my own memoir right now. And it's such a great, I get the message from spirit and my book coach all the time. Just write. And the mind wants to think about, but what about this? What about this? All the next steps. And you'll have people ask you about, like, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? And I don't need to know any of that. I just need to keep following spirit's lead.
I'll come in for you.
Thank you for sharing that. So I will say, if anybody's driving, maybe come back to the episode. And if you'd like to listen to the meditation, please do not compromise your safety in the process of listening to this. But I will turn it over to you, Amanda, and we will close this out with a guided meditation.
So much. All right. Yes, if you are driving, just keep your eyes open, but you can still follow along with us. For everyone else, find a comfortable seat and elongate through the spine, lifting through the crown of the head, and bringing the shoulders over the hips. We're going to be focusing our awareness on the heart and the mind. So go ahead and close your eyes, focusing the gaze toward the point between the eyebrows. This is your third eye point, center of intuition. And begin to take some gentle breaths, allowing air to come in the body through the nose, and then exhaling out through the nose. Breathing here. And centering yourself and your concentration on the third eye point. Now there's another point at the back of the skull that we'll be using as well. This is the gateway of consciousness. And as you're breathing, imagine that air coming in through this point, right where the skull meets the spine. Taking a few breaths here. Giving space to your thoughts, feelings, emotions, letting them float in space around you. And now bring your awareness to your heart center as you breathe. Allowing this area to expand in all directions. Inhaling into the heart. And then exhaling to the mind. Inhaling into the heart. And then exhaling to the mind. Cycling the breath in through the heart. And then exhaling to the mind. Inhaling heart, expanding. And then exhaling to the mind. Now take in an in-breath and hold that breath at the top. Bring your gaze back towards that third eye point, focusing here. We're going to repeat the word love, sending the vibrations of love through the entire body, washing away any negative thoughts about yourself, any self-doubt, any sense of worthlessness, drawing in that self-love. By repeating love, 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 and then exhale. Inhale into the heart, and then exhale to the mind. Gently breathing here, noticing sensations of peace and love through your entire body. Noticing any areas of stuckness, any tension spots, and sending love to that area. Love, love, love. Inhaling and then exhaling. You are love, and you are loved. Now opening the eyes. And that's where we complete our meditation.
Thank you again so much, Amanda. And I hope everybody is feeling as calm and peaceful as I am after that.
Yes, I hope so too. More peace and calm in the world. It's always good.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank Amanda again for her willingness to share her experience with this podcast so authentically for our audience. So if you find yourself in the Seattle area, please do look Amanda up at her website. It's yomoseattle.com. She offers in-person facial services as well as remote healing sessions. And you can also connect with her on Instagram or find her book, Train the Mind, Heal the Heart, on Amazon. And all of this information is detailed in the show notes. So thank you as always for listening, and I'll look forward to chatting with you all again next time. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.